There's a number that appeared on Jessica Martinez's water bill last week that made her physically sick. Not the kind of sick where you feel a bit queasy and move on with your day. The kind where you sit down hard at your kitchen table, stare at the paper in your hands, and realize something fundamental about the world has shifted beneath your feet while you weren't looking. $143 for water. In January, a month when her family of 4 barely runs the sprinklers. 6 months ago, that same bill was $52. Jessica lives in Fresno, California, in a modest 3-bedroom house her grandparents bought in 1987. She's a dental hygienist. Her husband manages a hardware store. They're not wealthy, but they've always been fine, comfortable. The kind of American middle-class family that does everything right, pays every bill on time, saves a little each month for their kids' college fund. But something has changed. Something she can't quite name, can't quite see, but can absolutely feel in the tightening grip around her family's finances. The water bill is just the latest symptom of a disease she doesn't understand. What Jessica doesn't know, what almost nobody knows, is that while she slept while she drove her kids to soccer practice, while she scrolled through her phone looking at vacation photos from friends, the very substance that flows from her kitchen tap underwent a silent transformation. Water stopped being a human right and became a financial instrument, a tradable commodity, an asset class generating returns for people who will never feel thirsty a day in their lives. This isn't a story about drought, though drought plays a starring role. This isn't even really a story about water, though water is the weapon of choice. This is a story about the final frontier of financialization, about what happens when literally everything, even the molecular compound that makes up 60% of your body, becomes fair game for Wall Street speculation. And it's happening right now, in real time, with a speed and ruthlessness that should terrify anyone paying attention. Let me take you back to December 10th, 2020, because that's when the future changed and almost nobody noticed. That's the day the Chicago Mercantile Exchange launched the first ever water futures contract. Think about that for a second. Water futures. The ability to bet on the future price of water the same way traders bet on oil, gold, or pork bellies. The announcement was tucked away in the financial press. Bloomberg ran a small piece. The Wall Street Journal mentioned it in passing. Most people scrolled right past it. Why would you care about water futures? Water comes from the tap. It falls from the sky. It's just there. Except it's not just there anymore. Not everywhere. Not reliably. California has always danced with drought, but 2026 is different. According to the California Department of Water Resources data released just last week, the state is experiencing its worst drought conditions since 2015. Reservoir levels at critical lows. Snowpack in the Sierra Nevada at 62% of normal. Groundwater tables dropping so fast you can almost hear them screaming. And here's where it gets dark. Here's where you need to understand what's really happening. When that CME water futures contract launched in late 2020, the annual trading volume was modest, experimental. A few $1 billion of contracts changing hands as institutional investors tested the waters, if you'll pardon the expression. But by January 2026, right now, this month, that annual volume has exploded to $340 billion. Let me say that again, $340 billion in water futures contracts trading hands every year. The total market for water as a financial asset class has ballooned to $1.1 trillion. $1.1 trillion built on the same molecular compound that's supposed to flow freely from your tap. Now, if you're like most people, you might be thinking, okay, but futures markets exist for lots of commodities. Wheat, corn, oil. They help farmers hedge their crops. They provide price discovery. They serve a legitimate economic function, right? And you'd be correct, in theory, when those markets work the way they're supposed to work. But here's what the textbooks don't tell you. Here's what they leave out of the economics courses and the CNBC explainers. When you financialize something essential to human survival, when you let speculation drive the price of something people literally cannot live without, you don't just create market efficiency. You create a weapon. And someone, somewhere, will eventually use that weapon. Let's talk about what happened in California over the last 6 months, because this is where theory meets brutal reality. In July 2025, water futures tied to California water rights were trading at around $43 per acre-foot. That's the benchmark. 1 acre-foot is roughly 326,000 gallons, enough to supply 2 average families for a year. $43 per acre-foot. Expensive, but manageable. By this month, January 2026, those same futures contracts are trading at $189 per acre-foot. That's a 340% increase in 6 months. 340%. Do you understand what that means? Do you grasp the implications? Here's what it means for Jessica Martinez and her family. Here's what it means for every person in California trying to survive this drought. The municipalities that supply your water, the public utilities that pump it, treat it, deliver it to your home, they have to compete for that water. They have to buy water rights. And when hedge funds in Manhattan and pension funds in Norway and sovereign wealth funds in Singapore are bidding up the price of water futures, when they're treating H2O like it's Tesla stock or Bitcoin, the price municipalities pay goes up. Way up. And that cost gets passed directly to you, to Jessica, to the single mom 2 streets over trying to keep her lawn from dying so the HOA doesn't fine her, to the elderly couple on fixed income who are now choosing between running the shower and buying their medications. But it's worse than that. So much worse. Because the biggest consumers of water in California aren't residential users. It's agriculture, farms. The people growing your almonds, your tomatoes, your lettuce, your strawberries. California produces over 1/3 of America's vegetables and 2/3 of its fruits and nuts. That doesn't happen without water. Massive amounts of water. And those farmers are now paying speculation-driven prices for every single drop. Think about the chain reaction. Think about the cascade. A hedge fund in Lower Manhattan decides to accumulate water futures contracts because their quantitative models are showing scarcity pricing ahead. They buy. Then another fund sees the momentum and buys. Then another. The price climbs. Farmers in Fresno and Bakersfield in the Central Valley watch the cost of irrigation water double, then triple. They have no choice but to pay it because you can't grow almonds without water. You can't grow anything without water. So they pay the higher prices, and then they pass those costs to distributors, who pass them to grocery stores, who pass them to you. That's why your grocery bill feels like it's crushing you right now. That's why a bag of almonds costs what it costs. That's why a head of lettuce makes you wince. It's not just inflation. It's not just supply chains. It's financialization of survival. And here's the truly insidious part, the part that should make your blood run cold. This creates a perverse incentive structure that rewards scarcity. When water is just water, everyone benefits from abundance. Rain is good, full reservoirs are good, snowpack is good. But when water is a financial asset, when its value is derived from scarcity, when traders are holding billions of dollars in contracts betting that prices will rise, then scarcity becomes profitable. Drought becomes an opportunity. Nobody has to actively create the drought. Climate change is doing that work for free. But once the drought exists, once water becomes scarce, the financial system is perfectly designed to extract maximum profit from that scarcity, to amplify it, to weaponize it. Does that sound conspiratorial? Does that sound like I'm connecting dots that shouldn't be connected? Then let me take you back to 2007 and 2008. Let me remind you of what happened the last time Wall Street financialized something essential to human survival: food. In 2007, as the global financial crisis started to build, investors were looking for alternatives to traditional assets. Stocks looked shaky, real estate was imploding, so they piled into commodities. And one of the biggest commodity plays was agricultural futures. Wheat, corn, rice, soybeans, the things people eat to stay alive. Between 2007 and mid-2008, wheat futures rose 250%. Rice futures more than doubled. Corn surged. And this wasn't because of some massive crop failure. Global grain supplies were actually adequate, but speculation drove the prices to absolutely catastrophic levels. Have you ever thought about water not just as something that flows from your tap, but as a commodity, traded on Wall Street like gold or oil? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's happening right now. In late 2020, water futures contracts began trading on the stock market for the first time. This means investors can now bet on the future price of water, specifically in California's multi-billion-dollar water market. The idea is that this will help farmers, cities, and other big water users hedge against price fluctuations, especially with growing scarcity due to climate change. It's presented as a tool for managing risk. But this move has a lot of people worried, and for good reason. To understand why, we need to look back at a similar situation. The financialization of food. Remember the years 2007 and 2008? The world experienced a massive food price crisis. The cost of staple foods like wheat, corn, and rice skyrocketed, pushing millions into hunger and sparking riots across the globe. What caused it? While factors like droughts and rising oil prices played a part, a huge driver was financial speculation. Before this period, the food commodities market was mostly for people who actually use the food, farmers and food companies. But then, big investment banks and hedge funds jumped in. They started treating food not as something to eat, but as an asset to bet on. They created complex financial products based on food prices, and a flood of speculative money poured into the market. This created a massive bubble. Prices became disconnected from the actual supply and demand of food. Instead, they were driven by market sentiment and the whims of traders. When the bubble burst, the consequences were devastating for the world's most vulnerable. Now, let's bring it back to water. The parallels are chilling. Just like with food, proponents of water futures argue it's about efficiency and risk management. They say it allows the market to signal the true value of water, encouraging conservation. But what happens when water, the very essence of life, is treated purely as a financial instrument? We risk the same kind of speculative bubble we saw with food. Imagine hedge funds betting on droughts, driving up the price of water, not because it's scarcer, but because they've created a market frenzy. This could make water unaffordable for small farmers who could be priced out by large corporations with deep pockets. It could lead to cities having to pay exorbitant prices for their water supply, a cost that would inevitably be passed on to you and me. The fundamental problem is this: food and water are not like stocks or bonds. They are essential human rights. When we turn them into speculative assets, we prioritize profit over people. We allow the stability of our most basic needs to be gambled with by those who have no stake in the actual resource itself, other than to make money from its price movements. The 2008 food crisis was a harsh lesson in the dangers of letting financial markets have too much control over life's necessities. It showed us that when speculation runs rampant, it's the poorest who suffer the most. Are we about to make the same mistake with water? The debate over water futures isn't just an economic one, it's a deeply ethical one. It forces us to ask a critical question. Should the price of something no one can live without be determined by a trading screen on Wall Street? Thank you for watching. That it encourages efficiency. That it's actually good for the environment because expensive water makes people waste less. And there's a grain of truth in that argument. A very small grain. Water has been underpriced in many places. Agricultural water use in California has often been heavily subsidized, leading to crops like almonds and alfalfa being grown in what is essentially a desert. There are legitimate conversations to be had about water pricing and conservation, but that's not what's happening here. What's happening here isn't thoughtful repricing to encourage conservation. It's not policy designed to balance environmental sustainability with human needs. It's financial speculation running wild. It's hedge funds accumulating water rights with no intention of using the water, just holding it until the price goes higher. It's creating artificial scarcity for profit maximization. There's a crucial distinction between pricing water sustainably and financializing it speculatively. One is policy, one is predation. Listen to this. According to data that emerged just last week from the California Department of Water Resources, a significant percentage of water rights in the Central Valley are now held by financial entities with no agricultural operations. They're not farmers, they're not municipalities, they're investment funds, holding water the way you might hold gold in a vault, waiting for the price to rise. Meanwhile, actual farmers who need that water to grow actual food that actual humans eat are being priced out. Does this sound familiar? Does this remind you of anything? It should remind you of the housing crisis, of BlackRock and other institutional investors buying up single-family homes, competing against young families, driving up prices, turning housing from a place to live into an asset class to trade. Except you can live in a tent if you absolutely have to. You can couch surf. You can survive without owning a home, even if it's difficult and degrading. You cannot survive without water. There is no substitute. There is no alternative. There is no couch to crash on when your water gets shut off. This is weaponization of survival itself. And the truly terrifying thing is that this is just the beginning. California is the test case, the proof of concept. But water scarcity is not a California problem. It's a global problem that's accelerating with climate change. The Middle East, North Africa, parts of India, the American Southwest, regions across the globe are facing water stress that's only going to intensify in the coming decades. And now there's a proven template for how to profit from that stress. A whole infrastructure of financial instruments ready to be deployed. Imagine what happens when this model spreads, when water futures markets emerge for the Colorado River, for the Rio Grande, for the Nile, for the Ganges, when every drought becomes an investment opportunity, when every dry riverbed represents profit for someone in a glass tower thousands of miles away. We are building a world where the most basic elements of survival are subject to market manipulation, where your ability to drink, to bathe, to cook, to live depends on whether some algorithm in a trading firm's computer decides water is a good buy this quarter. The podcast episode that dropped 2 days ago from the Investors Podcast, episode 641, titled The Commodification of Survival, they had a segment that I keep coming back to. They interviewed a water rights lawyer in California who's been working in this space for 30 years. And he said something that I think captures the insanity of this moment perfectly. He said, "I've spent my career helping negotiate water rights between farmers, municipalities, and environmental groups. It was always complicated, always contentious, but it was grounded in real use, real needs. Now I'm negotiating with hedge fund managers who've never seen a farm, never turned on a tap in California, but they own millions of gallons of water rights because their Excel spreadsheet told them water futures would appreciate. Real needs have been replaced by financial engineering. And here's what keeps me up at night. Here's the question I can't shake. What happens when the next real crisis hits? Not a manufactured financial crisis, but a genuine catastrophic drought. What happens when California faces a multi-year megadrought like the ones that destroyed civilizations in the ancient Southwest? What happens when there's not enough water for everyone, and the choice is between letting people die of thirst or overriding private property rights to seize water from financial speculators? Do you think those hedge funds are just going to hand over their water rights? Do you think they won't lawyer up, won't fight in court for every drop? Do you think there won't be a reckoning, a breaking point where the logic of markets collides with the logic of survival? History is littered with empires that collapsed because they commodified and financialized the essentials of life to the point where ordinary people couldn't afford to exist. Rome debasing its currency while grain speculators hoarded supplies. The French monarchy taxing salt while aristocrats accumulated wealth. The British Empire engineering famines in India while exporting food for profit. It's always the same playbook, isn't it? Take something essential for human survival, turn it into a commodity, let the market work its so-called magic, squeeze out every last drop of profit. And then, when the whole system crumbles under its own cruelty, everyone acts surprised. You might think we're different. You might think we're immune to the patterns of history just because we have smartphones and stock tickers. But, if anything, we're more vulnerable. Our financialization is more total, more complete, more all-encompassing than anything previous empires ever dreamed of. They commodified grain. We're commodifying water. They controlled trade routes. We've created global financial instruments that move billions in milliseconds. They build empires on resource extraction. We've built a global economy where literally everything, your home, your education, your healthcare, the water you drink, is just a line item on someone's balance sheet. Let's talk about Jessica Martinez. She doesn't follow water futures markets. She's never heard of the CME group. She doesn't know what an acre-foot of water is or why it matters. All she knows is that her water bill has tripled. She knows her grocery bills are crushing her family, and something feels fundamentally broken in a way she can't quite put into words. She feels like she's working harder than her parents ever did, doing everything right, and still falling further and further behind. Still drowning. And she's right, she is drowning. Not in water. There's not enough of that to go around anymore, but in a system designed to extract every last cent of wealth from people like her, and concentrate it in the hands of people who've never worried about a water bill in their entire lives. A little while back, a Bloomberg article ran a headline that was almost funny in its cluelessness. Water futures surge 340% as California drought intensifies. As if the drought is just some natural event that conveniently creates investment opportunities. As if there's no connection between financial speculation and the price ordinary people pay for survival. But there is a connection, a direct, brutal, inescapable one. When you allow water to be traded like a stock or a bond, when you let speculation determine its price, you guarantee that scarcity will be profitable. And anything that's profitable will be pursued. It will be maximized. It will be weaponized. So what do? What's the answer? I don't have easy solutions. I'm not a policymaker. I'm just someone who's read too many books about empire cycles and financial crises. Someone who can see the patterns repeating with a clarity that's almost physically painful. But I can tell you this. A system that allows water to be a speculative asset is a system that has lost its moral compass. Full stop. There's no economic theory, no market efficiency argument, no appeal to property rights that can justify turning the very stuff of life into a casino chip. Water should be a public good, a human right. It should be managed for sustainability and equity, not for profit maximization. And if that sounds radical to you, if that sounds like some dangerous ideology, then ask yourself this. When did it become radical to believe that human beings should be able to afford to drink water? What kind of society have we built where that's a controversial statement? Ask yourself what happens to Jessica Martinez and her family if this continues. If water bills keep rising. If food prices keep climbing. If every essential thing becomes unaffordable while financial markets celebrate new asset classes and record returns. Ask yourself how this ends. Because it will end. Systems built on the commodification of survival always end. The only question is whether they end through reform or through collapse. Through conscious policy choices or through violent upheaval. Through careful restructuring or through total breakdown. Right now, we're at a crossroads. The financialization of water is still relatively new. The infrastructure is still being built. The precedents are still being set. There's still time to pull back, to recognize this for the catastrophic mistake it is, and to say, no. Some things should not be traded on markets. Some things are too essential to be left to speculation. But that window is closing. Every day that passes, every $1 billion that flows into water futures, every hedge fund that accumulates groundwater rights, every town that loses a bidding war to a massive pension fund, all of it normalizes this insanity. All of it makes it harder to reverse course. Have you ever stopped to think about the bottle of water in your hand? It seems so simple, right? Just water. But what if I told you it represents one of the biggest and most controversial business trends of our time? I'm talking about the commodification of water. For most of human history, water was seen as a common good, a shared resource essential for life. Think about it. We get it from rain, rivers, and wells. But over the last few decades, something shifted. Water started being treated less like a basic human right and more like a product to be bought and sold, just like oil or gold. So how did this happen? It began with the idea that our public water systems were failing. Private companies stepped in, promising to be more efficient. They started bottling it, marketing it as cleaner, purer, and more convenient than tap water. And we bought it. The bottled water industry is now worth hundreds of billions of dollars. But it doesn't stop there. This idea has expanded into massive water markets where rights to use water from rivers and underground aquifers are traded. Big corporations and investors are buying up these rights, speculating on water's future scarcity. Essentially, they're betting that as water becomes more scarce due to climate change and growing populations, its price will skyrocket. This raises some huge ethical questions. If water is owned and controlled by a few powerful entities, what happens to the average person, especially in poorer communities? Access to clean water could become a luxury, not a right. Farmers could be priced out of the water they need to grow our food. Ecosystems could be destroyed as water is diverted for profit. The debate is complex. Proponents argue that putting a price on water encourages conservation and efficient use. They say it drives investment in much-needed infrastructure. Opponents, however, warn that it prioritizes profit over people and the planet. They argue that water is a fundamental part of our shared global commons and must be protected for everyone. What do you think? Is water a commodity to be traded or a human right to be protected? This isn't just an abstract economic debate. It affects every single one of us. The next time you drink a glass of water, think about where it came from and who controls it. The future of our most precious resource depends on the answers we find. Thanks for watching. If you found this topic interesting, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the world around us. See you next time.